What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. It is January 19th, and I'm joined again today by a guest, but it's a different guest and an old guest, an old friend from previous podcasting days. Jackson Payne from the Deseret News is on the show today. Jackson, how you doing?
Dude, it feels so right to be back with you in a podcast, right? Like we used to have our universe talk, our universe sports talk back in our BYU days, and it's been too long, so I'm glad we're doing this.
It's almost been 3 years. That's crazy how fast that has passed.
And then I kept trying to do the podcast after you left. I think I did like 3 episodes total. It just like couldn't
Man.
do it, I mean, getting an illness definitely affected that, but just couldn't do without you.
Yeah, well, it's been a fun weekend for you. I know with the Commanders playoff victories, getting to that championship game, and then also I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit BYU hoops because you were at the big Holy War rivalry game, BYU Utah men's basketball last night. So we'll talk a little bit about that in our recaps and also in our winners and losers segment at the end. Um, but to start off, as we always do with our recap of the week. Let's talk a little bit Utah Jazz. Jazz with two losses in a two-game week to get back into the top three lottery odds. So I think where they want to be. Jackson, I believe you've gone to a couple Jazz games this year, maybe.
I've not
You have not
enjoyed.
gone to Jazz games. You've been to hockey club games, so we can talk a little bit about that as well. But I know you are slightly invested in the Cooper Flag race because of the possibility of the Washington Wizards, your hometown team, possibly getting him. And just in general, covering BYU with AJ DeBonsa possibly, next year. Just kind of thoughts on Jazz tanking in general.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the only way that you can succeed in the NBA these days, right? Like you have to play the tanking game, and it sucks for fans. It's a sucky product to watch. Obviously, it's just a bummer, Like it's really sad that Jazz basketball doesn't matter because this state, there's just a different energy in the state when the Jazz are good. And I have such fond memories of the Gordon Hayward years, the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert years, even that first year post Mitchell and Gobert with Markkanen and Clarkson when they kind of flirted with the playoffs for most of the year and then kind of tanked down the stretch. Just it's so much fun when the Jazz are good. And so knowing that the Jazz are probably going to lose every game on their schedule, and it's just not going to be very pleasant basketball. It's a bummer, but like this is the reality of the NBA. You have to bottom out to get back to the top. And especially with a guy like Cooper Flag, I mean, his what he's doing at Duke right now is incredible. This is the kind of guy he's going to be a franchise cornerstone for years to come. The Jazz have to do whatever it takes to get him. And I mean, I have a soft spot for the Wizards, but I'm a Jazz guy at the end of the day. I'm never going to fully abandon the Jazz. Like, obviously, I want my hometown team to be good, but the Jazz are my team, right? This is they're my boys. I want the Jazz to succeed, and the tanking is the only way it's going to happen. And as much of a bummer as it is, you just got to roll with the punches to get to what's real. And if the Jazz can get Cooper Flagger, just at least be in that top three range, right? Get Dylan Harper or who's the other? Oh, blanking on his name.
So
Oh,
there's two guys from Rutgers, Dylan
yeah,
Harper and Ace Bailey. Is
Bailey.
Ace
That's it.
Bailey's the other one? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So if you can get one of Flag, Bailey, or Harper,
yeah.
an awesome outcome, and preferably Flag, but like I think he's going to be a Wizard just because the Wizards are leaps and bounds worse than the Jazz. But yeah, you gotta just take the tank for what it is. I mean, it's gonna be terrible for a while, but like look at the Thunder. Like the Thunder are awesome right now, and everybody loves the Thunder. It's such great basketball. Like when the Jazz get this figured out, when they come out of the tank, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It's hard to see an end in sight right now just because of how bad it is, but it's gonna be worth it eventually. I hope.
Yeah, that's definitely the hope, and I think the Jazz have put themselves in a good position to take advantage of being in those top three spots. It's funny how a lot of these kind of themes we're going to talk about connect because we talk about who's going to be in the top five of the draft. Well, it was a thought that Yegor Demon from BYU could possibly be top five. It's shifted maybe a little bit over the last couple weeks, but still projected to be a lottery pick. So we'll discuss him a little more when we get to talking more about BYU as well. But it's really interesting how the tanking game has kind of shifted a little bit at the beginning of the season with the Jazz. I did a whole thing about how they want to be in the bottom three. But even back then, Cooper Flag was like obviously really good, but still a question mark as far as college game and kind of next level. But over the last month or so, he's really just kind of skyrocketed, 40-point games, and everything you want to see of kind of a like a number one guy. So it's really shifted to where I think the Jazz have realized, all right, Like we gotta make this a priority. They've started sitting a bunch of guys. Jordan Clarkson hasn't played since like November. Larry Markkinen's playing a lot less as well. So interesting things. We got the trade deadline coming up here as well. So we'll see if the Jazz make any moves there. But that's probably enough Jazz for right now since they haven't been winning. But we'll move on to Hockey Club, who broke another three-game losing streak with a 4-2 win over the St. Louis Blues last night, and they closed out their homestand, which has been a lengthy one. I believe 7-game homestand tomorrow versus Winnipeg. Jackson, you have been to a couple of their games at home. Um, they haven't won much at home at all. Like I think this one and the win before were like their first home win since November. So a rough stretch there in December and early January for Delta Center fans, especially considering the Jazz and the Hockey Club. But I guess what have you seen? Have you seen a win at home from the Hockey Club? Like, were you at the opener?
I was not at the opener.
Okay.
I've been to 4 games so far, and I've seen
Yeah.
two and two.
Okay. Wow. You're 500.
And the one win and one of the losses I went to was the Caps, which is like my team. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really 3-1 at hockey club games. But in
Yeah.
terms of actual club wins, it's 2-2. Yeah, I mean it's this year is just kind of like I know with the look, I've been here before when the Redskins became the football team and then the
Mm,
Commanders. I got kind of name limbo, and it's
yeah.
kind of a weird spot. And I feel like the team is in the same place, just from a hockey standpoint, right? Like they're settling into Salt Lake, they're figuring out their identity, their new franchise. Ryan Smith is kind of trying to figure out how to run a hockey team. You're kind of seeing an audition of like, all right, who's in our long-term future? Is the Bear our long-term coach? Uh, I mean, I think there's a lot of trial and error this season. Like, they're tinkering with the lineups. They're trying to see which of these young guys is going to stick around as a key piece going forward. And I kind of before the season, the way I kind of saw this going out was like they get off to like a pretty good start and get people excited, then they kind of fall back down to earth. And then they kind of go on a run that kind of inspires people again. And you start thinking like, okay, what if this team is actually pretty good and makes a playoff run? And then it kind of falters and they become who they really are. And I think we're in kind of that last space right now
Mm,
where they had their nice start. They had a nice little encouraging run, but now it just, I mean, they are who they are. You don't, I mean, they're mid. Like that's kind of, they're too inconsistent. They're really young. But this is kind of the same thing in hockey where like experience matters and you have all these young players and they're learning to play with each other. And the best thing that they can do is just figure out who's in their long-term plans, I guess, for next year and beyond. Come out with their new name, get people on board with this team's direction, get fans involved. Like I think the Ryan Smith and his partners are doing a good job with these kind of cheaper tickets, getting people in the building. It's a little concerning to me that they can't win at Delta Center just because like it's such a unique environment. Like, I mean, the Coyotes had the weirdest home field, whatever you want to call it, last year. Their situation was so strange, and now it's a little bit it's different. It's better, but a little similar. Where like it's not really a hockey arena; it's a basketball arena. The sight lines are weird. They're still trying to figure out how to get it ready for hockey, and so I feel like they should be better at home, right? Because it's just such
yeah.
a unique to play. And so the fact that they're struggling at home is kind of concerning, but like I don't know. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. Just kind of get your fan base started here, kind of plant the seeds and see what you get down the line. I love the direction they're going. They're going to be a force in the West within a few years. This year might just be tough, but like this is the fun thing. You get to watch these teams kind of cut their teeth and grow and develop and hopefully become a contender in the West, both with the Jazz and the Hockey Club. And I've said it before. I think the hockey team's going to win a Stanley Cup before the Jazz ever wins the finals, but it's going to be fun when these two teams are both. It is so fun. Like when I was growing up, it was like the prime John Wall, Bradley Beal Wizards. The Capitals were always good. It's so much fun when you have two teams sharing a building that are in the playoff hunt and are playing meaningful games every night. It's going to be so awesome when that's the case here in Salt Lake.
Ooh, hot take coming from Jackson Payne about the first their Stanley Cup coming before the Larry O'Brien. We shall see.
It's a race for the banners, you know.
Yeah, and one thing I liked what you said about kind of getting to see the growth of like the young guys and seeing who's really going to be like the lasting, like who are fans really going to latch onto, who's going to be like the icon here of hockey. One thing that's been encouraging, I will say, has been the captain Clayton Keller. He's like struggled to start the season, but he's been really on fire as of late. I think he's kind of found his groove a little bit. And they need him because he plays in the attack, he's assisting, scoring goals, and all that, like getting the points that they need. So happy to see that. I think that was kind of a long time coming. hate to see Dylan Gunther go out, kind of one of their big young guys, but Logan Cooley as well, a young guy coming in. So appreciate that insight on the hockey club. And now we get to the main event, which is BYU versus Utah last night at the Huntsman Center. The Running Utes have now won three in a row, with last night's 73 to 72 overtime win over BYU. The Utes moved to 3-3 in Big 12 play, and BYU goes down to 2-4. You were in the house. You were able to witness the craziness, the overtime, the lack of free throw shooting. Um, I guess what was it like? I feel like it was, from what I heard, kind of a one-off as far as Utah crowd goes, because typically they don't get big basketball crowds, but they always come out for the BYU game, I think. So was it a decent environment?
Oh my gosh, it was incredible. It was, I mean, sold out crowd. The Huntsman Center is awesome when it's full and when people are into it. And the BYU game really gets people riled up. There were a lot of BYU fans there. I'd say it was probably at least 60-40 Utah BYU. Like, I mean, when BYU made shots down the stretch, it got so loud. It was like Marriott Center-esque in terms of volume. For me, I had a unique experience because I was watching the Commanders game at the same time. So I'm
Yeah,
watching the Commanders game in the midst of like a really tight in-state rivalry with Big 12 conference implications. And so like
yeah,
just the amount of anxiety I was feeling was crazy, dude. Like I don't recommend that. But obviously the Commanders won, so it all worked out. But yeah, that was it was an awesome environment. I think just like the biggest takeaway for me is it's so awesome that these two teams are in the same conference again. It's awesome that the games they play matter uh in a conference picture, right? It's awesome that you get to play twice a year. It's awesome that it can kind of be a real rivalry again because BYU is going to get to play this game at home. They're going to play this team at home again later in the season. And I mean, the fact that Chris Burgess defected from Utah to BYU and Caleb Lohner has a BYU past. I mean, it's Hunter Erickson was the hero in overtime for Utah. I mean,
yeah,
there's so much just kind of like trading between these two programs, and so I love that this game is going to be played again. It's such an awesome rivalry, and like Utah basketball is kind of in this weird space right now where like there's not a ton of fan interest. There's not a ton of buzz. They're not very good, but like maybe I mean I don't want to make it sound like BYU's so important that this is the case, but like maybe having a rivalry like this back in a more frequent pace, playing twice a year and maybe again in the conference tournament, maybe that gives Utah a little more juice in the program. It gets people more fired up. But yeah, I just weird. Just BYU's broken right now. Like
yeah.
they can't figure it out late in games. They can't win on the road. And like if you can't win on in a road, the Huntsman Center is hard to win at. They've won once since Jimmer. BYU's won once at Utah since Jimmer. But like if you can't win 45 miles away from home in like a similar altitude in a place where you have a ton of home fans there against a team that's probably not as good as you, when are you going to win on the road, right? Like this, it's just this team has some serious soul searching to do. Kevin Young, changes need to be made. Like not obviously, he's a first time college coach. Like there's growing pains. I think people overrated this BYU team coming in the season. I think they set the bar a little too high, and now BYU's mediocre to average, and people are starting to realize it and feeling like this season's this huge letdown. But like at the end of the day, BYU overachieved last year. They ran a super not gimmicky but very extreme, unique offense. And now you're changing coaches, you're changing personnel, you're starting two freshmen, you have a new staff, right? Like it's so much to handle in a conference like the Big 12 that will eat you alive. And so I think BYU is who they were supposed to be all along. And this year is all about getting the guys that are going to be back for next year ready to compete with AJ DeBansa and make a tournament run because AJ is going to change this program completely. If AJ is as good as everyone thinks he is, and Xavier Staten and some of these other recruits that Kevin Young will pull out of the transfer portal and vice versa, like BYU can be a dangerous team next year. And so getting a guy like Dallin Hall or Richie Saunders, Dawson Baker, Kevin Makeda, getting these guys ready to play in these meaningful Big 12 games next year and ready to dominate with AJ, that's the biggest thing for me. And so it'd be nice if they made the tournament. I don't think they're going to, but just get ready for next year. But it's a little disappointing that guys like Jaeger and Cannon Catchings are underachieving, and especially that BYU with a staff as good as this is, and with experience, like for Trevin Nell to miss the front end of an N1 in his 6th year of college, like that's unacceptable, man. Like I feel bad for him. Like he's a good dude, but like that's if your 6th year senior can't make that shot, who's going to, right? Like
Yeah.
so I don't know. I just kind of word vomited a little bit. It's just it's disappointing. BYU is what they are, but I don't know. I think the biggest thing for BYU, kind of wrapping it all up, is Yegor is underachieving. And when you're starting two freshmen like Yegor and Cannon Catchings, and they're supposed to be first round picks, and Yegor will still be a lottery pick, and Cannon Catchings will probably be late first, early second if he chooses to declare. Like if you can't get a ton out of those guys, and you're putting so much pressure on them, and you're having your offense and your scheme is designed around them, and then they're not getting you what you need, like it's just going to be rough sledding, right? So
Yeah, no, I think that's really well put, and you covered yeah like a lot of the bases there, which typically we kind of save this for the end, but I think it really fits in our recaps here as well, giving out the winners and losers for this week, because it fits right into this game with for a winner I picked Utah, obviously, big win for them, and for losers BYU, and also gave a winning shout out to the Jazz tanking, so
there we
tanking
go.
odds, there you go, so winning by losing, it happens that way. But yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I was going to ask you, about, BYU going forward. You mentioned, probably have extremely long odds to make the NCAA tournament at this point. And I know a lot was kind of made of like, last night's game. Neither team was great. There was like some quote unquote, some bad basketball, some might say between both teams. So it wasn't necessarily like, oh, two high level programs that are, t taking on each other and matching them shot for shot. But they did end up, reaching 70s thanks to overtime in scoring, and
And
but there was some rough free throw shooting out there. There were some rough turnovers here and there. Some stagnant offense at times. Some bad shooting in general. Not just from the free throw line, struggling to hit threes as well.
and like
So
I sorry to
very
kind of go
good.
off, like if BYU can't beat Utah when Gabe Madsen scores eight
Right.
total and
Yeah.
Utah misses 15 free throws, when is BYU going to win? Like,
Yeah.
that's just that Utah gift wrapped that game for BYU, and BYU couldn't figure it out. And like, I just, it's not time to hit the panic button on Kevin Young. Maybe the
Mm.
season, because the odds of going to the tournament are so high, but like Kevin Young's learning. This was going to be a rebuilding year, and I think the flash of having two possible first rounders on the roster kind of like hated that fact. But like it's so disappointing that like Utah could not have gift wrapped that for BYU more obviously, and just it came down BYU lost that game, and it's a bummer because you want to see BYU playing meaningful basketball in the Big 12. But like one thing I was gonna say too is I feel like Utah is like everyone likes to talk down on Utah, but like I was kind of impressed with them yesterday. Like I think Utah is constructed in a way where like they're not great, but they have a chance to be like really pesky and maybe win a couple like I would not be surprised if Utah just randomly ended up in like the conference semifinal in the Big 12 tournament just because like they can win in different ways. Like they're pesky. They have enough talent. Like they're just I don't know. There's just something about Utah. Like I'm gonna be watching them closely going forward, just because I don't think they're great, but I think they're capable, if that makes sense. And I don't think BYU's there yet. Like BYU might have more talent, but the execution and the whatever's happening on the court isn't there. Whereas Utah's maybe the opposite. And so
Yeah.
kudos to Craig Smith for that.
Right, exactly. And while we're giving shout outs to the running Utes, I will say, uh, last year's best player on the Utes, Brandon Carlson, um, he's playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder now, and like had a great game the other night, like hit a couple threes and just like fit seamlessly into the Thunder team, and like in a way where like people on Twitter were just like talking about him, being like, of course the Thunder pick up this random kid on a 10-day contract, and he ends up being fantastic. So like if you have one of your alumni, trending on Twitter for having a great NBA breakout, like that's pretty solid. So shout out Brandon Carlson, Salt Lake native as well. So some
Yeah.
interesting things happening with Craig Smith's program.
Kyle Kuzma ain't getting that kind of love, so might as well be Brandon Carlson.
Yeah, exactly. Jakob Poeltl, though, my guy, he'll always be my guy.
Love him.
Still repping up there in the north with the Raptors. So keep going at it, Jakob.
Hey, did
I
the Raptors win the Kawhi trade for getting Jakob?
well, actually, it was reverse. So I mean, the Spurs got him first, right?
Yeah,
And then they got him back, but I actually don't remember. I don't remember who the Spurs got in return for Jakob Poeltl. But anyway,
yeah.
neither here
Uh,
nor there. But certainly a major player up there for them, and he was Pac-12 Player of the Year at Utah. So back when that mattered. As far as Big 12
right.
Player of the Year, it might not be from either of these teams either. Um, but yeah, I think that kind of wraps up the discussion on that game, BYU Utah. It will be interesting, to see if Yegor can kind of figure some things out. The cannon catching things is interesting as well. Seeing if he comes back for another year and knowing that you've got a huge guy like AJ DeBonta to play alongside. But do you think these kinds of losses and like kind of the way Yegor has struggled in the system a little bit, does that put a damper at all on like the pure excitement that fans are feeling about like AJ? And like, do you think does that affect like AJ's excitement at all as well? Like seeing BYU lose a game like that?
I don't think it affects anything on AJ's front just because like BYU hasn't won a tournament game since 2012, right?
Yeah.
Like he knew that coming in. Like BYU's not an elite program. Kevin Young's building something, and I think AJ sees himself as like being able to elevate BYU. Like he's not
Mm,
going to BYU because it's elevated. He's going there to elevate BYU.
yeah.
And he can be the guy, he'll be the hero, and obviously he'll get a great he'll be around an NBA staff and NIL's a factor, but I mean, if you think this rough stretch for BYU is gonna sway AJ, I mean, I want to show you BYU's March history, right? Like
Yeah,
he
yeah,
got to know what he's getting into.
yeah.
In terms of, I just think AJ is on a different level than Yegor, right? Like AJ is a traditional like he's your traditional NBA blue chip prospect.
Mm,
Like he comes out of high school. He can do everything. He'd be the number one pick this year, probably. People are saying like he's so good at everything he does. And one thing I've gotten to see him play in high school twice now. One thing that really stands out to me about AJ is he plays really solid defense. Like he cares defensively. And who's to say whether that'll continue in the league? But like I'm really impressed by the effort that he puts on the defensive end of the floor because a lot of guys that are these great prospects and can shoot really well and are just an offensive force. Like they don't care about defense, but clearly it matters to him. He's intentional about that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the AJ show at BYU, and I just feel like in terms of Yegor, like he's the European prospect. He's 18. He's skinny. He's playing on the other side of the world. He's learning a new language, right? Like, I mean, he speaks pretty good English, but like the point remains, like it's like when you're a missionary and you're always going to feel a little bit strange in a
yeah.
different land that's far from home, right?
There,
Like,
there's more factors at play than just the basketball.
yeah, and like he's a kid. Like I feel bad for the struggle because it feels so mental because the talent is there, but like he's getting pickpocketed. He's a 6'9" dude getting pickpocketed by like 5'10" guards. It looks like
Right.
it. Like
Well, and the same thing happens to Wemby, which who I watch every game, and he's seven
no,
four. But when he's dribbling the ball, it's down there by the guys that are 6 feet tall, right? So, and he loses a ton of balls like that.
I just my thing about Yegor is he's going to be a much better NBA player than he's a college
Mm.
player. The analogy I always use is it's like a really good high school quarterback who's throwing to like Dylan, who's going to go to BYU Idaho. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, no disrespect to anyone on BYU's roster, but like when Yegor's throwing dimes in the NBA to, I mean, name a player like
Jordan
wherever
Poole.
Jordan Poole, right? Like, let's say he ends up on the Wizards and is slinging it to Jordan Poole or Bub Carrington or
Yeah,
one like NBA type guys. He's doing it here to Mawat Mag or Trevin
yeah,
Nell,
yeah.
right? Like,
A little
so
different.
it's a little different. I think his game is more suited for the NBA, and it's just it's a little confusing to me why BYU insists on letting him be the primary ball handler when he's not going to play that position in the pros, right? Like I think he's more of like a 2-3 in the NBA. Like he's a Josh Giddey, he's a Ben Simmons, where he's a great passer. He's got good length. He can be disruptive defensively once he figures that out, but he's not going to be a great shooter. And I just don't understand why Dallin Hall, your proven floor general in the Big 12 level, isn't running the offense and maybe letting Yegor play off the ball a little more. Maybe that makes Saunders a little more aggressive when he has his chances. And like this team can't just keep relying on Richie Saunders. Like
Yeah,
Saunders is great. I'm the president of the Richie Saunders fan club, but like he can't carry a team on his own. He's a great number two or number three option. And then in overtime, they loved feeding Foose down low. And it's like, I love Foose, but Foose is not the guy that you can just he's not your go-to guy. Like when if you can just move Yegor off the ball, I feel like that's such an easy. I'm not a basketball expert. Kevin Young knows more than I do, but just like to me, it looks like moving Yegor off the ball and having Dallin run the offense. Just it makes sense in my mind, right? Like, and I think I've talked to a lot of people that feel the same way. I just I don't understand why Yegor has to run point because it just doesn't seem like a nice fit right now. And Trevin Nell, like just the free throws yesterday are kind of a smaller example of a bigger issue. Like, what is he really giving this offense when he's not hitting three pointers? What does he really do? Like Dawson Baker, I know he can be kind of a trick or treat player. Like his consistency isn't great, but like he can score at all three levels. He can create his own shot. He's got this craftiness offensively, and maybe you give him a longer leash and see what you got there, and maybe dial back some of Nell's minutes for Hall or for Baker. Like I don't know. There's just little things that I feel like they're not going to save the season, but they might make a difference going forward. And might as well try it now because it's not working right now. BYU's broken, and I'm really excited to see how Kevin Young and his staff respond. But like something is seriously afoot at the moment.
Yeah, in the words of Andy Samberg in the classic "Pop Star Never Stop, Never Stopping," we'll say the reviews on the BYU Utah game for BYU
Mixed reviews.
mixed reviews in general.
That scene is so great.
And also, I appreciated that you said earlier, there is another game to be played in Provo against Utah again. So it's not like football where you only get one shot at it every year, right? And you have to wait in agony if you lose for another, 12 months. You get another crack at it here in a few weeks. So it could be another one to look forward to. I mean, it'll probably be close once again. And like you mentioned, even if it is just 45 minutes away, BYU has played better at home than on the road. So something interesting to watch there, certainly. As we finish up our recap, another important college basketball team here in the state, the best college basketball team in the state, Utah State men's basketball team, suffered just their second loss of the season on the road at UNLV. Unfortunate for them. And I was a huge proponent of them being ranked, but I said myself, if they get into the top 25 and they lose a game, then by all means you can take them right back out of the top 25. So that might happen come tomorrow. They were right on the edge as well, so we might see them Utah State falling back out of that. And another team in kind of similar grounds who made it into the top 25 but has since fallen out, Utah women's basketball, two losses in a row and have lost three out of their last four. So bit of a down period there for the women running Utes. But now we'll quickly look ahead to the week that is coming up. Utah Jazz will start out with a three-game road trip to New Orleans, OKC, and Memphis. So a bit of a gauntlet there for the Jazz that should end up with three losses. Maybe the New Orleans one there should be interesting. Utah Hockey Club, three-game road trip as well after their last home game tomorrow on Monday. And then Utah, I mentioned Utah men's basketball. I mentioned they've won three in a row now with that BYU win. Another big test. They've got two ranked games coming up. First, taking on number 10 Houston, and then they come back home to play Baylor. So two of the best teams in the Big 12 coming up for the Utes. We'll see if they can keep it going. And then BYU men's basketball on the road at Colorado, then home versus Cincinnati. Utah State looking to get back in the win column at home versus Nevada, and then on the road at Air Force, and Utah women's basketball versus BYU on Saturday in Provo. So another Holy War matchup on the women's side down there at the Marriott Center. I know in our time covering BYU together, we went to a good number of BYU women's basketball games. Do you plan on attending the women's Holy War down there?
What day is it? Is it Saturday?
I believe it's Saturday. Yes.
I might have to stop by, It's I haven't been to a women's game in a while. It's a really fun atmosphere.
Yeah.
I like getting the courtside media seats always,
Uh,
but just good times covering Tegan Graham and Haley Gonzalez and our girls back then.
those were the days. I wish there was a way to know you were in the glory days, while you're still
I,
in the good old days while you're still in them.
I always tell people that was the most fun I ever had, like as a student reporter, was covering that
Yeah.
team. Like it was just we were the insiders for the team. They were just I mean, I remember one of our writers who will remain nameless for confidentiality purposes here. His headline was BYU women's basketball. BYU women's basketball absolutely mauls Pacific. And it was just like,
And the team loved it.
and the team loved it, but like that wasn't an exaggeration. Like this team was just they were destroying everyone. It was so much fun. It was so sad when they got bounced early in the WCC and NCAA tournaments, but what a fun year that was. Really hope Amber Whiting and her crew can get it turned around because women's basketball at BYU can be really, really fun when they're good.
Yeah, we're talking courtside right behind the bench. Pop,
Spider-Man 3 on the tablet.
Spider-Man 3 on the tablet, popcorn, and maybe some fruit snacks in there too with a little, if they've got Pib, great, even better.
Oh, taking me back. Take me back.
So that's something to look forward to for you Utah and BYU fans. If you didn't get enough in that men's game up in at the Huntsman, head on down to Provo Saturday at the Marriott Center. Should be a fun one. That just about does it for our conversation tonight. Jackson, I appreciate you coming on. Any parting thoughts that you would like to leave with the water cooler crowd?
Dude, go Commanders. We need a
Oh,
win today. This is gonna
left
be
left hand is up, permanently
my
up.
left hand is so far up right now. I mean, this has been the dream season. You got some local ties here. Bobby Wagner, obviously,
Yes.
Utah State. Michael Davis played at BYU. Brian Johnson's our assistant head coach. He's one of Utah's greatest quarterbacks ever. Like, hop on the bandwagon. Like, get your left hand up because do we really want another Chiefs Eagles Super Bowl? I don't think anybody wants that. Nothing good happens when Philly wins. Like, we just please hop on the bandwagon. I need all the support I can get. I'm freaking out. This has been the best season of my life. I need to see Jaden bring this team to the promised land. I want to see a Super Bowl in DC. I'm looking at flights to go home for a parade potentially. Like, make
Wow.
it happen, JD5. Like, come on.
Man, if that doesn't get you pumped up for the week ahead, MLK Day, we're out here. It's just
This is the biggest thing to happen in Washington this week.
yeah, well said. Well said. Well, we'll go ahead and leave it at that. We appreciate Jackson coming on, and we'll catch you guys next week.